Hey, look at this cool machine I built. Just one assembler and it just built what I want. But can't handle fluids yet. Let me just make one little upgrade. Alright, that's done. What more could it possibly need? It's kind of annoying how it doesn't count the ingredients properly in the assembler. Just one moment. Look at it. It's great. I've added some fancy concrete to it. But it kind of spazzes out if the production is finished. I'll be right back. I did it. It's perfect now. Just the throughput is limited for one inserter. Just one more. There, we are done. It has it needs a little upgrade. Just one more step. Just one little thing. Just give me one more. Yes, I'm doing quite well. Thanks for asking. So, what is this video about? Well, if you've seen the last one, I've built a little machine which can basically build anything with just one assembler. And I want to go into detail how it actually works. However, as may have noticed, it already has changed since the last time I recorded. So I'll section the video out a little bit. First, I'll give a quick summary how to actually use it. From there, I'll go over how the new design works. And at the end, I'll add on what the differences are to the old machine and what there was to note and why it changed, basically. All right, then here we go. So one upside of changing it this often is that it's very easy to use compared to the first design. You just have one assembler here, which sets the end results, and you have to supply the basic resources the assembler can't build itself, and there you go, the rest it does itself. Just one thing to note, you can set a limit how much it should assemble of the given thing. There are some rules to it, you can read them up here. The very nice thing is the entire machine now, including all combinators, have now very nice comments to go through all the details if you want to look into it yourself. The blueprint is down in the comments, so let's get right into it, how it actually works. But the way it looks now, it's basically incomprehensible. So let's peek a little bit into my mind and visualize how I actually look at the machine. Now, this was the perfect setup to make a joke about how my mind looks, but it's just combinators all the way down. By splitting it up this way, it should be a lot easier to see what I'm talking about. However, a quick diagram here for you, how the setup looks here and how it compares to the normal setup. So you can just see with the colorized blocks where you can find each relevant combinator which I'm talking about. Last note before I start, I know it might not look that way, but I'm actually fairly new to building complex machinery with combinators. So whatever solution you may see here most definitely ain't the most optimal one, but it's the one I came with up, so we'll go with that. Naturally, the core of the machine revolves around the assembler. We have a bunch of useful settings here, which enables the whole thing. The first is the most important one, which allows us to set the recipe for the machine. So all the combinators in the back basically work out which recipe should be set. Then the next important one is the setting which allows us to read the ingredients for a given recipe. So the machine can set one recipe, like our end goal, and then it can read what ingredients it needs to build that recipe. And in the last step, it can cycle through the ingredients for a given recipe and see if it can build those as well. So it's kind of a loop where it sets a recipe, reads the ingredients, and then cycles through the ingredients which to build. And it repeats the process until it can build the final end recipe. And the third option, which is somewhat important but less so, is that we have the ability to read the contents of the machine, because as a whole, the machine has to decide how much material it has in the whole system, including the assembly machine, the different chests, and then this inserter belt here, to decide if any given recipe can be built. The first grouping sets the recipe for the machine. The way it works is that this combinator here decides on the end goal for the entire production. And every time a recipe gets set, it gets set to this green assembler who does the actual assembling. And it gets set to this blue assembler who reads what ingredients are needed. So the way you can visualize it is that the blue assembler is kind of the manager who decides what is to do. while the green assembler does the actual work of building anything. To make this work, the ingredients from the blue assembler get routed into this memory cell here, which saves every single resource that is needed to assemble all steps of the machine. This selection of ingredients gets routed into this random selector, which just decides on any ingredient on random to check. This gets passed on to this memory cell here, which does the real setting on what gets built. So we cycle randomly through the ingredients needed, which gets passed to this memory cell, and this memory cell decides I'll take this random selection and I'll check if this one actually can be built. And this gets passed on to the other groupings to the side. The second grouping is fairly simple. It's just here to split up the wires between the green and the red one. This concept repeats a bunch of times within the machine, since we have to be very careful with the assembler, since they at one part get set to a given recipe, but at the same time they also give out the given ingredients or resources they contain. So you have to be careful to not mix up your signals to at the same time read the content and set it, which is why this repeats all the time. The same idea is with this combinator here, with this combinator here, it pops up all over the machine. The next four groupings have a shared job. They decide if a given recipe can and should be built. The third row does so by multiplying the given recipe by our limit we want to have, by checking how much we have in all the boxes and content combined, by then splitting out our signal for just the one target recipe we want to have, and checking if we have actually reached that number or if we still need to assemble more. While the third grouping decides if we should build more, the fourth grouping decides if we can build more. It does so by checking what ingredients we have in the entire system and subtracting it from the ingredients needed for the given recipe. And if we don't have enough resources left over to build, it gives out an X signal to signalize that we can't build the given recipe. The fifth grouping is a funny one. It's just a patch for a bug. For some reason, this memory cell here sometimes tries to set two recipes at once. Normally, this combinator here should prevent this from happening, but I'm guessing the way circuit network works, the moment this combinator takes over in the random selection, it sometimes manages to pass through a second signal just as the other signal gets removed. To prevent this combinator reads out how many signals are actually set in our target memory cell and passes on if there are more than one or two. The sixth row puts together the information of the previous three blocks in this combinator here. And if all our conditions are met, or if any condition is not met, it puts out a no signal that the recipe can't be built. However, the way the circuit network works, it needs some time to pass a given signal through a bunch of combinators. Therefore, we have a clock here which counts up to 10. And only after our timer has been reached will it pass on any no signal that a given recipe cannot be built. And in this case, it gets passed on to our main memory cell here and resets the given recipe if it can't be built for 10 ticks. The seventh grouping isn't strictly necessary. It's more a quality of life feature. The way the previous groupings work is that they deny any recipe if they can't or should be built. However, this means that if the machine has already built everything it needs to build, it will still keep switching around recipes and trying if it can find anything. To prevent this, the seventh grouping checks if for all ingredients our limit is met compared to what we have in the chests, and then passes on a special stacking symbol to tell the machine, no worries, you can stop now, stop trying to find a new recipe. And once any given ingredient isn't on the limit anymore, it naturally switches off and allows the machine to go back to searching for a new target to build. The eighth grouping is responsible with supplying the machine with base resources. In a way, it is similar to the seventh grouping because it checks what the machine contains and sees if it is anything still missing. The main difference is that it excludes the end goal of the production from this calculation in this combinator here, and only calculates for all the remaining ingredients what it needs. And then it passes this information on to the filters. In theory, it could directly pass on the information from this combinator to this inserter here. The issue we run into is that a inserter is limited to 5 filter options. So if we have more than 5 ingredients it needs, it wouldn't be able to pick up the sixth one until the other 5 are satisfied. To solve this, I have an intermediary step here with this combinator here. This combinator combines the signal from the belt with the signal from this combinator and only passes through a signal if the belt contains a given ingredient and if it is still needed. This way, this inserter will only filter for the ingredient on the belt and not anything else. And there we are. This was already the last step. Now, to quickly go over the differences to the previous design, it comes down to the two groupings here at the end. I added the seventh grouping because previously I used to limit how much the machine builds by setting a limit here in this box. However, this got kind of annoying since you can set multiple end goals in this combinator without issues, and then you had some troubles how much stacks he actually produced. This way it can decide on its own if it has enough, and you don't have to limit it in this output box here. The other one is the eighth grouping. This one had two reasons to be added. The more important one, is that the system now actually uses belts. Previously, it was limited to the throughput of one inserter with the Sushi boxes I used. This way, however, you can add as many lanes as you need to reach your desired throughput by simply copying the setup here and adding it on without issue. The second part is that the inserters have a filter limit, as previously mentioned, which can only hold up to 5 resources. This way, I no longer have to worry about this limit, which can and sometimes lock the machine up otherwise. It mostly happened with stuff like the splitters, because the splitters itself need a lot of other splitters, and those splitters won't get supplied by belts, and in the worst case, your filters 5 different splitters, 4 different splitters, and can't put anything on. So this way, the machine can't lock up by having to filter for too many things at once. Also, a quick explanation for how the sushi boxes from the last video worked. They have a very simple idea by having a combinator here, which takes the content from the first box and subtracts the content from the second box, and then passes on the result as a filter to the inserter. As a result, if the first box contains more of any given resource than the second box, then it gets set as a filter for the inserter, and the inserter then equalizes the contents until the second box contains more than the first box. So usually they will end up with about the same amount of resources. The fun thing about this design is that some mods offer larger boxes with a lot more space, and you can use the same idea for those. And it's kind of handy to sometimes get a very simple line for very complicated resources with a lot of different input ingredients. As a little treat, let me show you how the machine can look in production. You can just add the machine to your given input lines and set whatever end goals you may wish. You can also just keep adding on machines for more different results and for more crafting speed as you desire. And since you can add lanes as you need, you can add as many machines as you want. And there's basically nothing stopping you from doing this indefinitely to meet whatever production goals you might have, which means even science can run at a somewhat reasonable pace. And with that, we have already reached the end. Let me just give one quick thanks to the creator of the even bigger Dahlia mod, which allows you to move around combinators without breaking the cabling. This was a godsend because for the previous designs, I kept rebuilding the entire machine and redoing all the cabling like a maniac. So no more. Now with the mod, you can just move it. Also a big thanks to the person who ported the mod to Space Age already. That was a godsend. So where do we go from here? Well, the beginning wasn't a complete joke. I already have some ideas how to upgrade the design. Also, I've landed on the new Kliba planet and I'm currently working out the insanity of the logistics there. I'm also considering making an alternate design for the Everything Maschine with the bio chamber, but we'll see if that works out. Otherwise, if you have any questions, post them below. Any suggestions as well, the hard word, are welcome as well. Then that's that. Have a good one. Bye bye.